Welcome back to another episode of the Diary of a CFO podcast, the space where you will always find real world insight to become a better leader and be better at life. I'm your host, Wasia Kamon, and today I'm so delighted to have with me a special guest, Bryan Lapidus. He is the director of FP&A Practice at AFP, the Association for Financial Professionals, and he has more than 20 years of experience in FP&A and the treasury space, working at organizations like American Express, Fannie Mae, and private equity-owned companies. At AFP, he is a staff subject matter expert on FP&A, which includes designing content to meet the needs of the profession and helping keep members current on developing topics. Thank you so much, Bryan, for being on the show.
Well, see, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So why don't we start with you telling a bit about your career journey and the story where you find yourself now as director of FP&A Practice at AFP?
Sure. So I have kind of a unicorn job.
Okay.
Nobody would have drawn this up to begin with, and I certainly had not. But it's one of those things, right? You leave yourself open to chance. You make preparations along the way, and you find something great. I could start with getting my MBA. I was, before that, I had bounced around experimenting with different jobs in different fields. I was actually a history major and a Spanish minor before I got my MBA. My first position was at American Express, and I went through the rotation program there. It was a great learning experience, which I think is so important earlier in your career to have breadth of experiences, because you just don't know all the things you don't know. I'm a fan of going broad early and then finding an area of specialty and expertise. I went through the rotational program, and my favorite part was FP&A, although I did enjoy audit, risk, and treasury. But then my family and I decided that we didn't want to be in New York. We wanted to be closer to our family in Maryland. So we came to Fannie Mae. And then after that, I actually ran FP&A for about 5 years at a private equity-backed company. Then I was in consulting for a couple of years. And while I was in consulting, I was trying to build up the consulting practice, and I got involved with AFP. I had been a member for years, right? And as a member, I followed the content. I wanted to be better. Actually, I was a member both 2 times, once when I was in Treasury and once when I was in FP&A. It's a little bit of, I knew the company, I knew the organization, I knew what they were doing. And so I started writing articles for them and teaching classes while I was consulting. And at some point I realized I just enjoyed that more than I enjoyed the consulting itself. It was that sense of education, of community, of building up, of teaching, really. And so I talked to my boss. I said, we should just make this official. And so 6.5 years later, here I am at AFP.
That is so awesome. And I love what you said about starting early, as broad as you can. So can you please share a bit more about what were the departments or functions you were involved with in that rotation program?
The first one was actually FP&A, but they didn't call it FP&A back then. Right. It was just, financial analysis. It was people who think about business decisions and do the budget and think about where to put your next dollar of capital. So I did that, and we launched 2 projects overseas for a stored value prepayment card. I love the idea that, I was working with the marketing team on how do we sell this and what is the total addressable market. And I got to work with operations on how do we actually enact this and get this in play. And I found that because I was the one with the financial model, I was at the center of all the decisions. I was asking all the questions about, yes, it's an interesting idea, but is it a good idea? And how do you know? And what are your assumptions? And I just loved that role.
Oh, yeah. I so relate to it because I didn't know I was doing FP&A until later in the career because nobody was using the term FP&A. So when did you actually realize it was called FP&A? Because I know AFP does a lot of education about what FP&A is.
Right. It's funny. So AFP had, we've had our certification, the FPAC, in the market since about 2013, 2014 is really when the first tests or people could sit for that exam. And one of the things that AFP saw was that there was a need to define all these other people who are hanging around the CFO. One CFO said, FP&A is everyone who reports to me who's not in accounting, audit, or tax. And so they were defining that space at the same time I was moving through that space. So I think the first time I ever really heard that term was when I became the head of FP&A for this private equity-backed company. They had the role, and I said, well, I've got those skills. I could do that. And it turns out I actually have done a lot of that, right? It was the planning, performance management, decision support. It's really all those questions about decision support and
Mhm.
what do we do next? They were developing the body of knowledge, the curriculum, and a whole platform at the time that I was moving into that platform.
That's amazing. Like I said earlier, I didn't know I was doing FP&A, the term business partner. I didn't know any of that, even though I was doing it until after the fact. But now, when I go on LinkedIn, I feel like it's all about FP&A. I have so many people reaching out to me saying, I'm an accountant, I have to be in FP&A. And I'm like, you don't really have to be necessarily in FP&A. So why don't you tell us a bit about how, when you're an accountant, even if you don't have an FP&A role, how can you make that transition?
And I want to make sure accounting is incredibly important, and
Yes.
we need more accountants, as
Yes.
the restatement last week showed. Right, we need more accountants. It's incredibly important, and accountants make some of the best FP&A practitioners. At our conference once, I was running a workshop, and we asked people, who came from FP&A, and about 50 to 55% of the room had said
Wow.
that their background was in accounting. But when people leave accounting, it's often because there's something that they want to do that accounting doesn't allow them, which is that
Mm.
forward looking aspect of where is the business going? What are we going to do? We have this information. So what? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about moving your career from accounting to FP&A, and it's not even moving a career, because so many people I think want to become a CFO. And I think it's important to have multiple roles in the office of
Yes.
finance, right? It's like getting a stamp in your finance passport, and accounting is
Mm-hmm.
an important stamp and FP&A is an important stamp. And in order to
Mm-hmm.
make that transition so that you can do it well, there's a couple things that I think you need to keep in mind. One is you have to have comfort with ambiguity. Accounting is all about getting the numbers into the GL and creating that book of record. FP&A is all about getting the numbers out of the system and saying, well, what do we do with this now? And the
Mm-hmm.
future is unknown. And so it's always probabilistic. Well, this could happen. We're never going to have 100% certainty in our numbers or our estimates, but this is the best information we have now. That's kind of a mindset shift for people who want to go from accounting to FP&A. I would say a second really big difference is accounting. When you think about who their audience is, who consumes their product, right? Once it goes into the GL, right, it's so critically important to get the financial statements right for
Mm-hmm.
the auditors, for the board, for the investment community, and the owners, right? If you're in accounting, probably 70% of the people who are going to consume your output are other people in finance or the finance community. When you're in FP&A, 70% of the people who consume your output are the business
Yes.
leaders, the CEO, the business lines, the line leaders who are looking at what you're doing and saying, okay, this is interesting. This helps me to do X, Y, and Z.
What are some of the things that they can also do in terms of continuing education?
So AFP offers a whole suite of opportunities, right? We have our own learning management system, so members can come in and kind of plan out what makes sense. There's some very simple things. We have guides. We just put out our FP&A maturity model. We also have treasury content. We have a payments subject matter expert, right? So we have really a broad breadth of webinars, papers, and articles. That's kind of the easy, low hanging fruit. We also have badges. So, a little bit more in depth, you can get a badge that shows that you've taken several courses in this one area. And then we have certifications. We have two globally recognized certifications. FPAC, which I mentioned, has been around for over a decade. And
Mm-hmm.
we actually started out as a treasury organization. And so since 1986, our CTP, Certified Treasury Professional, has been out in the market. Between the two, there are 40,000 people who hold our
Oh,
certifications
wow.
across, I forget the exact number, but it's at least 80 different countries globally.
That's awesome. And I like the part about treasury because we don't talk that enough, right? Because now I step into the role of CFO and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad I did some treasury before, but I don't hear much about the treasury aspect. Like, what do you feel people wanting to be CFO should also consider when it comes to treasury?
Well, there's certainly different kinds of CFOs, right? If you're a
Mm-hmm.
small company CFO, that's very different than being, say, a line of business CFO versus a
Yes.
large company CFO. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're in a small company, it's the treasury function is really more about cash in, cash out, working capital management, you're not going to have a dedicated treasury function as you
Mhm.
would at a large multinational company. There's certain elements that are important all throughout, no matter where you are. But the more sophisticated the company is, the more sophisticated the treasury and the interaction with markets becomes. Our payments line of business sometimes fills the gap because in smaller companies, treasury is really cash in, cash out. It really is payment management and that in depth direct cash flow management.
Mhm.
So I would say that we have content that is available at all levels, right? And
Mhm.
so you can grow with the content as you grow in your role.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Because what I'm finding out too is time. Time is of the essence, but time is very scarce. And sometimes you want to train your employee, you want to coach them, but you don't always have the time and capacity to do it. And sometimes you yourself, as a finance leader, are looking for time to invest in yourself. What are some tip or best practices to be able to still do your job, but also learn as you go?
You have to be really intentional. There's passive learning, which is something came into my inbox and I'll look at that and I'll read that. And then there's intentional learning, which is this is something that I really need to be good at. And I'm going to dedicate the time to focus on treasury or on risk management or stocks or whatever it is, right? So you dedicate the time to do that. And you really have to carve out the time and say, I'm going to do this every 1 hour a day or every Friday. And it's hard. I mean, I say these things like it's hard for me to do it, and I'm in the education business now, right? I'm not a finance practitioner like I was for 20 years. I'm in the education
Yes.
business, and so I know the value of it, and I talk to the value. It's really hard. You have to do it. You have to have a boss that supports it. And if you are the boss, right? If you are the CFO, the best thing you can do is model that importance of learning. Get a certification yourself. I remember when I was at American Express, when the CFO went out and got his Six Sigma certification. That's a significant effort. You have to go through, you have
Yes.
to have a project, you have to take it
Mhm.
through. And so, I'm sure he was a lot busier than I was and a lot more responsibility. But if he could find time, it really sets the tone for everybody else and says, this is what we value. This is who we are. We invest in people, and it's not just lip service. Our CFO is doing it. They're
Wow.
making time for it. I should do it too.
Yes, I agree. Like once you see that your boss is doing it, it's helpful. But then at some point, like in my case, I have more letters behind my name than in my name itself. I have so many certifications. It's crazy. Then I saw the F I was like, oh, that's nice. Then I was like, oh, my brain. So like at which point is there I don't want to say I made it, I'm done, but then you should do more. Like at which point you feel like you should reach that balance between, okay, I've done this. How should I learn more? Like what kind of learning I should be more involved with?
So, if I were to turn your question around, it's a little bit
Mhm.
of asking, when are you done learning?
Yes.
And hopefully, the answer to that is never. Hopefully, learning becomes a habit. And I'm thinking of a conversation I had with William Washington. He was on our FP&A advisory council. Now he's on our board of directors. And he talked about his own learning journey. And I was just always really struck by this. Like he started out when he was relatively young and he was in this company in finance, but he found that he was interacting with a lot of people in the warehouse. And so he decided he needed to learn another language so that he could communicate with them better. And another time in his career, he said he decided he needed to learn how to type because that just made him more productive. And he
Mhm.
went on and he got his BA, he got his MBA, he got a master's in law so he could specialize in law. He has a Six Sigma certification. He decided he wanted to learn how to play golf because somebody told him that learning golf is good for business, right? What I really respect, there's many things I respect about him, but one is that voracious curiosity and discipline to keep learning. So whether you call it education that gives you letters after your name or
Mhm.
whether it's just the habit. I think about that conversation and I try to emulate that, right? There's always something to learn and always something to pursue.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's hard though. It's my part right now that I struggle, and now you're going to be my therapist. Is how do you balance all that? How do you balance, for example, putting yourself out there when it comes to personal branding, for example? Because yes, you have the certification, it's great, but actually getting the roles you're targeting is a different kind of learning as well. what have you seen in that area? Because I think AFP also offers help for job search and things like that, or coaching.
We do work with coaches, whether it's through us directly or at any of our events like our conference or our FP&A forum. We believe in the power of the community and the networking. So having those conversations, being in the room, having the hallway conversations of just saying, tell me what you did. How'd you get there?
Mhm.
What worked? What didn't work? So peer networking is incredibly important. Working with a professional guide and coach can also be very important. Getting input from different areas, whether we have at our conference we have a career development track, right? Those kinds of things. The kind of thing you're going to talk about at the FP&A forum, right?
Yes.
You're a finance leader. Now what? And you're going to talk about what it takes to get there, these things they don't tell you, the soft skills they don't tell you, the hard skills that are the prerequisite, right? Those kinds of things, again, it's hard to do, but I think it's important to both have your head up and head down at the same time. When you're head down, you're looking at your work and what's in front of you, and you've got to be good at what you do. But when your head's up, you've got to have that breath, whether it's talking to people or learning about AI or finding out all the things that are not AI that could still make you good, right? You have to do both simultaneously, which is incredibly difficult.
Yes, but it's so worth it though, right? Because I feel like learning for me has been interesting. So, like I said, I was done with the letters. I'm done with the letters, but I'm enjoying like public speaking. I'm enjoying learning more about personal branding and influencing and things like that, more on the soft skills side. Because I think at some point too in your career, you have to have that balance between what you learn in terms of technical skills, but also in terms of soft skills, right? So in your career, you transition from being in the weeds or analyst to now being consultant and now being in education. Like, what are those soft skills that help you easily pivot in all these functions?
I think it changes at different times in your life, at different times in your career. When you're early in your career, there's probably a little bit more emphasis on gaining the technical skills because you don't have that. But when you're young, those soft skills, I think curiosity and growth mindset, those two will get you everything else. How do you get better at dealing with people? Well, you have to be curious about what they do and who they are, and
Nice.
you have to be willing to learn from them. As you become more senior, when you're CFO, you're overseeing so many different areas. I have this image from Gartner. It's a graphic and it shows this 37 unique roles that a CFO oversees. Well, you know this. You can't be an expert in all 37. And you certainly can't do all 37 at the exact same time. So you need to be successful to manage through other people. You need a great controller so that you know that's taken care of. And you need someone who's great at FP&A and treasury and tax and right and investor relations all the way down the line. So then when you're senior, you need to be able to manage people. You need to be able to ask questions, which requires active listening, probing questions, patience. You need to grow and develop your people so that they can be better at their job and eventually aspire, whether it's CFO or whatever they aspire to. So the skills that you need at that point are all about people management. You don't just become CFO and then turn it on. You've got to develop that throughout. So I'd say different skills. Maybe you want to look at what it takes to be a great CFO. Listen to this podcast, right, and figure out, right, and hear what's important, and then work backwards and say that's where I want to get, and here's the path from here to there, and I can start developing these along the way.
That's awesome. Yes. And I think mapping that path for me really clicked when I started going to conferences. After COVID, I was like, okay, I need to meet people. I was an extrovert. So COVID, I was like, oh my God, bouncing against the wall. I need to see people. I need to see people. Then I started going at conferences, and really now I plan my year ahead of time by the conferences I want to go to, because you get to meet those people that'll help you map out, okay, if this is where I want to go, listen from people that have been there. And your conferences are amazing. So what are some of the exciting things that you're currently working on in that space?
I'm trying to remember, you spoke last at our conference in San Diego, I think, right? So that was our
Yes.
big conference. Honestly, for us, working on the big conference is a year-round effort. And so already we are accepting propositions and submissions to speak. Will be in Boston in 2025.
Oh,
And that'll
wow.
have 7,000 people and 130 different sessions and keynotes and 250 vendors, right? That is the all-you-can-eat buffet for corporate finance. We also have a separate conference that is if not the all-you-can-eat buffet, but the choice cuts just for FP&A. And
Nice.
that's coming up soon. That'll be March 17th through 19th in Austin. And it'll be 25 sessions, all focused on FP&A. Usually when people come to this conference, they say, I found my tribe. I found my people, because everybody here is FP&A and all the vendors are FP&A. And it's a competitive process. We accept submissions. They're peer reviewed by practitioners. And then we put together what makes sense for a whole day and a half track. And so that's the other thing that's consuming a lot of my time right now.
Oh, wow. And I'm so excited to be speaking. And I'm glad my topic got picked. Promoted to leadership, now what? So definitely for those listening, I hope to see you in Austin next March 2025. But for me right now, it's hard for me to think about March 2025 because it's like, what happened to 2024? Is it just me?
What happened to 2023, right? You say that every year.
Yes.
I'm a husband, I'm a father of two girls. And one of the things that somebody said that is truer and truer is that the days go slow, but the years go fast.
Ooh.
Right? You're busy every day, and you're grinding through every day, and you turn around and you say, well, what happened to 2024? Now we're in 2025. I'm going to do something different in 2025, right? I'm going to have my resolutions, right? And the only thing I can tell you is that at the end of 25, you're going to say, where did that go?
So true. And that's why we have to start planning now, planning the conferences, planning the books. You see all these, I have like 4 books that were on my list at the beginning of 2024.
How'd you do?
Still on the list.
Still on the list.
Because I picked up other books. That's the thing. I got distracted.
Yeah, I've got a couple there, and they just stare at you, right? They stare at you and say, how about it? I don't know who it was. Someone on Instagram gave all of us permission to start a book and not finish.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to read it cover to cover, especially if it's nonfiction, right? You can pick it up and put it down when you want and when you need it, and it'll still be there waiting for you, whether it's 24 or 25.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm still doing that. I'll start reading 5 pages and be done.
And if you look at it, and if they only have 5 pages worth of material, that's fine. You don't have to prove anything to get to read the other 195.
Thank you, Bryan. You made my day. And also, today's your day. It's your birthday. I feel so special that you came on my podcast on the day of your birthday. What are some exciting things you're planning there?
Oh, that's just going to disappoint you. No, I don't have anything exciting. I mean, we just finished Thanksgiving weekend. My daughters went back to school. At the time we're recording this, some holidays are coming up, so we'll celebrate then when everybody's back all together.
Okay, good for you. I always have cake on my birthday. Actually, 2 cakes on my birthday, so I can have cake for breakfast the next day. But that's another thing that you should not do. So some advice you give to the next generation of finance leaders, and definitely won't have birthday cake left over, but what will be some piece of wisdom that you'll have for the next generation of leaders?
I talk to a lot of students, a lot of finance students. I run AFP's University Partners program. One thing that I'm always struck by is students who come to me, and here's a real life example. This guy, he's a junior in college, and he says, I spent my sophomore internship working in asset management, and I want to change over to FP&A, but I'm worried I'm not going to be able to make that transition because I have a career in asset management. I looked at him, I said, you're 21 years old. You don't have a career in asset management. You had a summer internship in asset management. What I find, and I use this as an example, and this has happened at multiple schools, multiple conversations where people feel like they need to have mapped out exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. And what I found is you need to have both an idea of what you want and a willingness to do something else, because so much in life is circumstance around you. We like to think everything we do is alpha, right? It's our own individual initiative that gives us above market return. But beta is also really important. Things happen to you. Markets move up and down. You go to conference and you meet people. You put yourself out there. Your boss goes off on a new venture and pulls you with her. So my advice is have an idea so that you're progressing and not stuck in a grind, but also be open to serendipity and change and things that you hadn't seen.
Wow. Yes. And it's so aligned with your career journey, Bryan, of how you started and where you are now. And you You sound and feel always fulfilled when I talk to you. So you must be having a blast in your role.
My job is literally to talk to interesting people who are doing interesting things in the world of finance, and then find ways to package it up and recycle it and send it back out to the rest of the community. So
Mhm.
I'm talking about interesting things, I'm having fun, I'm putting people on stage at conference and writing guides and doing webinars, right? If I do my
Yes.
job right, the community benefits. And honestly, I just find that very fulfilling. I know it sounds a little bit corny, but I really do find
It
that
is.
fulfilling.
It is. It does sound fulfilling. And it also shows that having that finance background allows you to do so many things.
Oh,
It
yeah.
allows you to do so many things. And I think that's something that we should also remind people. You know how to do finance and accounting. You can find your ways in so many great opportunities, right? Because it will always help.
There's one of our member company that we do a lot of work with. She explained to me that she has this wonderful problem, which is the rest of the business constantly poaches talent. So she gets them in, she trains them, but because they understand the business so well, and because they understand how money is made and the value
Yes.
chain, that they go out to the business. And on one hand, she's like, "Ugh, I hate to see them go. They were, they're so good and valuable." But on
Uh-huh.
the other hand, she recognizes that she is seeding the company with people who understand not just the business, but also how they make money. And that makes her job better in finance because she knows who
Yes.
she's talking to on the other end. And it
Uh-huh.
helps the entire company. Certainly,
Wow.
finance in general, certainly FP&A is a net talent feeder and exporter of talent.
I agree. I've seen so many people that will say, "Oh, I was a CPA, now I'm a marketing development executive, and I was in FP&A, and now I'm in the business in operations, VP of operations, coming from FP&A from finance." I mean, what have you seen? If you can
Yeah.
share more about that.
In my own journey, in between the consulting and the FP&A and consulting, I actually was VP of operations for a
Oh,
medical
wow.
testing company. So it was very easy to make that leap. I know I've talked to other people who leave finance and then come back, and they often come back at a higher level. And what they
Mm,
say is that when everything is just a number in a cell, you think you can manage by pushing numbers around and changing assumptions. You think you can manage the business. When you
mhm,
get out in the business, when you're responsible for a P&L, when you're
mhm,
responsible for that income line on the bottom, it
mhm.
changes how you think. And the best CFOs that I know have experience in the business and then coming back, and they see the business differently. The other thing that I see, and this is really a big company phenomenon, is as part of their talent development, they move the executives around, right? And sometimes it's a little bit awkward. I know one person at a very large bank told me about a boss who came from marketing and was the CFO. Okay, so that's clearly someone who thinks you can good managers can manage, but that they were also trying to train up that person. So
Mhm.
as you move up, if you want to be CFO or CEO and you build relationships, getting out of finance and then coming back to finance is incredibly powerful.
Wow. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning, rotations, being able to see the world from different lenses so you can be better, projecting and driving change.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
is so powerful. Thank you so much, Bryan, for being on the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will definitely share all the good things you're doing at AFP with our audience. And I'm so excited to join you next March in Austin.
Well, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to you and look forward to seeing you in Austin in March.
That's it for today's episode of the Diary of a CFO. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave a review, subscribe, and also share with your family, friends, and colleagues. If you have any topic you would like me to cover in the future, you can email it at ask@thediaryofthecfo.com. Again, the email address is ask@thediaryofthecfo.com. See you soon.